Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Shoemaker. I'm Director of Policy Research and Industry Relations at the American Society of Civil Engineers. Thank you so much for your attendance today for this really critical discussion on aviation infrastructure aligned with the 2025 report card for America's infrastructure. We will turn to our panelists momentarily, but again, appreciate the opportunity to share key insight on the 2025 report card and how it relates to on-the-ground work in project development, infrastructure support nationwide. And with that, David, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Excellent. Thanks, Josh. Again, I'm really excited to moderate this session, and we have three fantastic speakers that are all going to be sharing their experiences and case studies with airport master planning, and highlighting some of the transformational capital programs that they have going on at their airports and facilities, including Kansas City International Airport, Syracuse Hancock International Airport. So all of which are really going to highlight and how they're actively addressing a lot of the challenges that we discovered in the report card. So there'll be a big focus on landside terminal assets, but we'll also be talking a little bit about airside pavement and other asset categories as well, really to provide a kind of broad perspective across all of the different sort of components within an airport. So our agenda today is really, I'll go through a brief overview of the ASCE report card, specifically focusing in on some of the findings from the aviation report card. And then we'll have some fantastic projects and case studies from our panelists. We'll have a panel discussion, and then we've saved about 25 minutes at the end for open Q&A from the participants. So as you hear these great presentations, think about questions that you might want to ask or discussions that you might want to have with the group. And we'll make sure that we save some time for that at the end. So just to introduce our great set of speakers. So I'm Dave Sklar. I'm a Senior Vice President with WSP. I'm our National Asset Management Strategy Lead, and I've worked on big asset management projects for airports and other transportation agencies kind of across the US. So you'll hear me talking about asset management a lot because that's kind of my perspective. But you'll hear from, again, great panelists that have done boots on the ground work at airports. So Melissa Cooper, who's the Director of Aviation for the City of Kansas City. Juliette Peyro, who's a principal with Magnuson Clemencic Associates, and then Jason Terreri, who's the Executive Director at Syracuse Hancock International Airport. So just some FYI, the webinar is being recorded. We will provide the recording and the slides after the session. For any input or questions that you have, please type them in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that as we go. And again, reading some of those questions off for the Q&A section. And then if there are any technical issues or questions, you can also use the chat function for that as well. So with that, I wanted to give everyone just share kind of a brief overview of the report card, especially for those that may not be familiar with the report card process itself. So, the report card is really important on a national level. And the goal of the report card is really to kind of highlight the critical nature of infrastructure really to the American public and really highlight the impact on our national economy, global competitiveness, quality of life. And really the purpose of the report card is to sort of highlight those issues for the public and elected officials to keep those discussions in the forefront. So that's really part of the mission of the report card, is to make sure that the public and elected officials are well aware of some of those issues, educate and inform. So really ASCE uses a report card to serve in that role, using an A to F school report card that folks are very familiar with. It makes it easy to interpret, and really provide a thorough assessment of current infrastructure conditions and needs, looking at 18 categories and 8 different criteria. So one thing that I will highlight from the most recent 2025 report card is that across the board, the score was a C, and that's the highest it's ever been. And if you look at those arrows, we really found either consistent scores or increasing scores for most of the most of the different asset categories, which was really great. And part of that is really highlighted by all of the IIJA infrastructure money that's been funneling into these different categories over the last several years. And I think the goal of the report card is to really build the business case to sort of keep that money flowing, both at the federal, the state, and the local level. It really is starting to have an impact. But I think long term, we need to make sure that we communicate that this isn't just a one-time thing, but that level of investment is really going to be needed over the next several decades to get us to where we want to be on a national level. So there are three kind of key trends that we found. Sort of the first is really the impact that climate change and vulnerability are having. So natural disasters, extreme weather. A lot of the infrastructure investments are sort of focused on making our assets more resilient. And as I said before, sort of those federal and state impacts have had investments have had a really big impact, but these things really take years to realize. And sustained investment is going to be really, really important in the future if we want these to have a permanent impact and keep raising those grades, which is really, really the goal of all of this is sort of that long-term continuous investment and to kind of level out some of those spikes that we've seen over time where we have big funding for a short period of time and then lapses where we maybe lose some of the progress that we make. And then the last thing is really having better data on performance and performance indicators to help infrastructure owners make some of those key decisions. So one thing that I will point out is that as part of the aviation committee, we really struggled with whether we want to raise the grade for aviation or kind of keep it the same. So I will say, aviation had a grade of C minus, which was consistent from the previous score. We really debated whether to increase that to reflect all of the IIJA funding and all of the really extensive kind of airport modernization programs that are going on from the West Coast to the East Coast. So on the West Coast, you see obviously Portland Airport and their new terminal. On the East Coast, you see LaGuardia, JFK, Newark. Really a lot of investment happening. But we really felt as a group that a lot of those projects are still ongoing. So until they're complete, that's when we're really going to see the impact of those. So we do expect the score to increase in the next report card. So even though the score was the same, we're definitely seeing a lot of positive trends. And again, you'll hear from that in a lot of the case studies that we're going to be talking through as well. Just a lot of great airport projects happening on a national level that really are going to increase the grade we expect in the next report card. So for our methodology for the scoring process, we really look at 8 different criteria. So capacity, and obviously that's been a really big driver for airports is sort of improving capacity, building new terminals, new parking facilities. We look at condition of the existing assets. We look at, funding, both current funding and the certainty of future funding and future needs. We looked a lot at operations and maintenance and the challenges that folks are facing there. Again, both with staffing and just continued funds to maintain state of good repair. Public safety is obviously paramount in those investments, resilience, which I mentioned before, and also innovation. So just to highlight a couple trends that we found from the grade, again, D plus was a grade in 2021. We kept that the same for 2025, although we do see, positive trends happening in the aviation sector. So wanted to point that out. We do expect that to increase, in the next report card. 4 years from now, assuming all of this funding sort of continues to flow and these projects come to fruition. So from a capacity perspective, most airports are obviously above now the level of passengers that they had before COVID. So there's a big, obviously, push to increase capacity and sort of address capacity needs as well. And really, the projections are that that's going to continue to increase over time, and we're going to need to really see increased capacity in most of our major hub airports. So one thing I will point out is that on-time arrivals have declined. So obviously, airspace capacity is a big issue as well. Runways and so forth. For condition, most of the airports, we found the runways are in really good shape. 98% were really in excellent, good, or fair condition, and we find that fairly consistent for the larger hub airports around the country. Maybe a little bit less so for some of the private airports, but major airport upgrades are underway. There are a lot of terminal modernization, enhanced security, expanded parking, improved roadways, consolidated rental car facilities. All of that is really going on both to deal with capacity and condition. So for funding, airports, unlike other infrastructure categories, primarily are self-funded through operating revenue, bonds, grants, passenger facility charges. IIJA did have a big influx of funding for the airports, which, as you know, had a huge impact on just being able to get some of these big projects off the ground. One thing that I will say too is that IIJA made it a little bit easier to use some of those funds for landside assets, where typically they've mainly been used on the airside uh, side of the airport as well for runway improvements and so forth. But a lot of that with IIJA has been able to be used for terminal and parking and other improvements as well. So the recent FAA reauthorization included some modest funding increases, but keeping that passenger facility charge capped at 450. That's really a missed opportunity. And I think the industry as a whole, really wants to see that increased. And then in terms of future needs, again, even though all of this investment has had a really big impact, we still have a gap for what we really need to kind of get the airports to a grade A or B where we really want them to be. So there's still a $114 billion gap that ASCE projects for airports kind of nationwide. So again, it just sort of reiterates the need for that consistent level of funding, as some of these projects are finished. So operations and maintenance, you all know about the shortage of air traffic controllers. It's contributing to delays and safety concerns. Most airports are also struggling to hire just day-to-day maintenance personnel at the airports to keep the terminals and other facilities in good shape. Public safety and resilience is always in the forefront. Again, a lot of that is driven by the fact that many of our airports are sort of at or over capacity. So the Reauthorization Act is allocating 200 million annually for things like resilient safety and a zero tolerance policy for near misses. Obviously a lot of those investments are also focusing on innovation. So making investments in the passenger experience, navigating the terminals, customer communications, all of those things are obviously also very important as well. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Melissa, who is going to give us just a good overview of some of the, new capital planning and new terminal construction that they've been doing at Kansas City International Airport. So, Melissa.
Well, thank you very much. We are Kansas City International Airport is a part of the Kansas City Aviation Department, has two airports in the system, the Kansas City Downtown Airport, which is a business airport, as well as the Kansas City International Airport, which is what we'll be talking about today. MCI is about 55 years old, and we're faced with similar problems with infrastructure and aging infrastructure, and we'll talk a lot about the old terminal, which was three horseshoes, three individual terminals into the transition to a new terminal. We kind of joke when is new no longer new. We opened almost over 2.5 years ago. February will be our third year of operation. So learned a lot. Love to share the program with you. So, like I said, our first terminal was three horseshoes. Some of us lovingly called it the three-ring circus. If you can imagine, it was state of the art at the time. It was a door to aircraft scenario, ton of commercial curb operations. You could walk into the facility, walk 75 feet. If you think about 75 feet, not very long, straight to your terminal, to the jet bridge. So if you're looking at that picture, you can see that it was a old concrete facilities built in 1972. We got to about 1995, decided that there was really some needs from terminal improvement program. We started the process to design and rebuild inside this 75-foot deep structure. Great news in 2000. So we were ready to go just before 2001. So start thinking of the history of aviation security and starting almost day two of operation at the facility. We went from a completely open concept, 75 feet from door to jet bridge. Then you added a wall, and then a taller wall, and then a taller wall, and then security. And as we're in the middle of this terminal improvement program, we deal with the transitions of 9/11 and the inception of TSA, and had our new facility. That program cost $258 million. At the time of our reopening of the new terminal, that would have been essentially $425 million. So that life cycle, we can go to the next slide, had really showed that there was a need to make some changes. If you again think of 75 feet in depth, there was no place to put passengers. There was no place to put uh, shops, concessions, eating. You can see in this picture not only the crowds that would be at a Southwest Airlines gate hold room, you can see the concessions kind of at the bottom, really a mock-up kiosk, and then the restaurant built above. So depending on how it worked, you had to enter security, go into a elevator, take the elevator up to go to the only restaurant in this area. We had real struggles with airline consolidations. We had Terminal B, which was our uh, terminal that held Southwest Airlines, Vanguard Airlines at the time, TWA, and Delta at the busiest. Almost 80% of our traffic was in one facility, and the other two were definitely underutilized. And the aircraft hold rooms were designed for smaller aircraft. There were no seats, no restrooms. The restrooms were designed at the uh, previously pre-secure area. And so it was really a struggle for everyone to have an enjoyable experience. So you go to the next slide. The aviation department took the lead working with the airlines to look at in 2013 and 14, what does our future look like? And probably 30 or so renditions, but really came down to four major designs. Were we going to renovate, or were we going to have a new terminal? And so a lot of thought and opinions and feelings went into the process. Initially, the airlines really were supportive of the renovation. They thought that would be saving money. So looked at both renovation option A and B. Then as we kind of progressed through the process, realized there was sharing old money with bad money. And so we went ahead and made the decision to proceed with a new terminal, with that conversation being led by the airlines. And new terminal A option shown was what was selected. That happened about, you can go to the next slide, 2013, 2014, and really then started okay, we know what you want to do. What does the community say? And I can tell you, change is hard, especially in the Midwest, heart of the show me state. And our community initially was not for this huge new terminal project. In fact, we heard the word convenient about 1,000 times a day. People really like that idea of being able to walk into a facility, walk 75 feet now, and get under your airplane. Unfortunately, with the horseshoe shaped and security checkpoints, you're walking much more than that. But there was a desire for convenience. And so really took our whole community, took the airlines and took our business community to educate our voters on what the need was. And so in September 2017, we finally had enough traction to really start the project. And we entered into an agreement with Edgemore as a master developer for the project. They hired CWC, which was a joint venture of Clark, Weitz, and Clarkson. We had the public vote saying, yes, we want to do that, and had 75% of our Kansas City residents vote yes to support the project. Again, not a we're an enterprise fund. We don't have any general fund tax money, but there was such pushback in our community that the elected officials wanted to make sure that this is what our community wanted. So no vote was required, but a vote was committed to by our mayor to make sure that he had support from the community. We entered into sorry, if we go back a little bit.
Sorry.
No problems. We started groundbreaking of Terminal A, which is where we would become the building of the new terminal site. We signed our use and lease agreement with the airlines. Began vertical construction in April of 2020. So if you can imagine, that was literally 3 weeks after the COVID pandemic shut down the community, and we made a decision to start building. Um, we had our first call for artists in that same month or same year in October. We topped out the facility in January 2021 and opened our facility on February 28th, 2023. It is a municipal project, $1.5 billion on time and on budget during a global pandemic. Next slide. I talked a little bit about the community. Their desire for something different was listened to. I mean, we had thousands of hours of meetings with our community who say, what do you see? What do you want? What's your vision? It really came down to 5 goals for our community design. And this is what people wanted to see. They wanted it to feel like Kansas City. They wanted to have a sustainable footprint, be environmentally solid. They wanted flexibility and adaptability. As we saw over the previous 50 years, um, things changed. TSA was new. Airlines ebb and flow and merge. I want to be able to kind of move with the changing times. We wanted efficiency in our operations, and we wanted an inclusive and accessible passenger experience. And those were all just things that we looked at as we were building this new facility. Um, Here was one of the kind of fun facts of this project. So you can see in this picture, our facility had always been circled. We called it the three ring circle for a lot of reasons. We had a counterclockwise road system. We had terminals A, B, and C. Future terminal A was going to be built in or old terminal A was where the footprint of new terminal was going to be. We had to clear out traffic. And this was one of the things that kept people up at night is how do you reroute traffic going from a clockwise or counterclockwise to a clockwise. We added new roundabouts. Terminal B and C remained open the entire duration of the project. In fact, on February 27th, the last flights came into Terminal B and C, and they taxied or towed, depending on the airline. There were aircraft over, and we departed out of the new terminal. But decades literally of road traffic. And the only thing I can say is COVID helped us be lucky here because in April of 2020, we had what 3% of our traffic. So we were able to retrain and figure out how to re-navigate our road system differently without the traditional spring break and April traffic that we see. Next slide. Here's a rendering of our new terminal. It is a beautiful facility, lots of glass, lots of open air, lots of natural elements. To the left of it is a $6,200, I'm sorry, 6,200 space parking garage. It's a 40 gate terminal, 30% or 30 gates previously. So we had a 25% increase in capacity. Largest capital program in the city's history, on time and on budget. What changed? Uh, Remember I said our horseshoe had a lot of curb. We never had curb problems. We never considered um, really as a community changed how we did business from 9/11. People still parked onto the curb and ran inside. We went to a completely different arrivals, departures, two level uh, situation, and we had to reteach our community what does that mean and why you can't park on the curb and why you have to keep moving and what a cell phone lot is. Our facility was increased significantly. If you can imagine, once you cut the gates off in half, we had about 30 feet of facility we were maintaining, where the airlines were responsible for everything else. We took that capacity and we took over, and we have a much larger facility to maintain and to operate and to clean and to decorate and all the things that come with that. Uh, we added significant amount of pavement, and I'll share that information here in a couple slides. But we also added a virtual ramp control. Previously, the tower was able to see all of the pavement and was able to control pushback and ground operations from gate to runway. With our new facility, that ramp control aspect became the aviation's responsibility, and we have a state-of-the-art ramp control virtual component that we utilize. The previous director, my past boss, was a huge advocate and proponent for the glass boarding bridges. They are a game changer. They're beautiful. We have 40 all glass boarding bridges. It really helps with that accessibility. People can see not out see what the aircraft looks like, what the operations are, and helps you understand who's the pilot of your airplane. We went to a much more robust concessions programs, and we adopted this guidance light system, the red light, green light, both in the restrooms and in the parking garage. Next slide. Here's some photos. Like I said, we had the arrivals and departures on two different levels, 6,200 spaces into our parking garage, and drop off at the door. Um, Completely different. I would be lying if I didn't say the first several weeks were a mess, and the first major Thanksgiving holiday. I had my whistle and my vest, and we moved traffic, and we learned a lot of things those first 6 months. Next slide. Here's some data. We had enough paving on this project to equal 100 football fields. It was completed in 5 phases. We had several different contractors. It took 700 calendar days to complete all the paving, equivalent of a 70 lane miles of interstate. And I think that's all mine. And I'll be available for any questions. This is a huge
Great.
project
Thanks,
for the
Melissa.
city.
Fantastic presentation.
This is a huge project for City of Kansas City. With it came other civil projects. We worked on the constructed the runway next to the terminal prior to opening the terminal. So we had lots of things going on. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it moving forward. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Melissa. And we'll definitely have plenty of time for questions at the end, and appreciate your presentation. That was, and we'll get yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Juliet Peyru. I'm a structural engineer consultant with Magus and Clementic Associates. I'm a principal in our aviation market sector, and I specialize in airport terminal designs, a lot of terminal modernizations, especially in high seismic areas like on the west coast of the United States. So MKA has worked on airports all over the country, but I wanted to highlight a few recent projects that we've done with common themes that are applicable kind of across the industry right now. So starting with Nashville Airport. Nashville is one of the fastest growing cities and airports in the country, and their existing airport facilities were not able to keep up with the passenger capacity that they were seeing. So the first set of projects was called the B&A Vision Project. So this is about $1.5 million of investment for new infrastructure and facilities for the Nashville airport. That vision project is now complete, and they've actually moved on to their New Horizon set of projects that we're working on. And the goal is to get the Nashville airport to be able to handle a capacity of around 40 million passengers and spend about $3 billion. So that's in addition to 1.5 billion that was spent during the Vision project. And that will all be complete in 2029, soon to be followed by a new terminal. So this is consistent with what we're seeing across the country, where terminals just need more gates, more facilities to be able to handle all of the passengers that they're seeing at their airports. So at Nashville Airport, there's a lot of typical work that we've seen. There's a lot of demo of existing facilities that just can't be used anymore because they're too outdated. There's new terminal expansions. We're working around the existing facility and trying to keep it operational. That's very common on these airports, and I'll talk more about that. Excuse me. The planners actually at BNA did a really great job with the master planning with their different projects. So, and how to phase those projects. So project 1 of BNA Vision was actually an enabling project for project 3. So project 1 actually allowed the build of 2 new terminal wings on either side of the main terminal so that the security screening checkpoints could be moved. So that for project 3, which involved modernizing the main terminal portion of the building, they were able to take out that security screening checkpoint because they had the new facilities on either side to handle the passenger capacity. On project 3 as well, we were able to be innovative with our roof design and try to minimize impacts to the operations of the existing airport. So you can see in the photo, there's a new roof that actually goes over both the departures and the arrivals roadway. And this is able to be erected overnight, over several nights without shutting down the roadway during the main passenger flow time periods during the day, so that the airport didn't have to do too much rerouting, like Melissa just mentioned on her project at Kansas City. Okay. All right, moving on to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. So at SeaTac, they've been dealing with, or SCA, they've been dealing with a lot of aging infrastructure with a lot of their existing airport facilities dating from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And one issue is that building codes have drastically changed since that time frame, especially in regards to seismic loads and seismic detailing. So SeaTac has been working on systematically upgrading their facilities for seismic retrofit to bring them up to current codes. So starting with the North Satellite, which you can see in this photo, and moving on to upgrading portions of their main terminal with their gateway project, the South or S concourse as well. And there's all other concourses where they're working on HVAC upgrade projects, which then increase loads on their existing facilities, and those also trigger seismic retrofits. So on these projects, again, phasing is really important because the facilities like security screen checkpoint and the hold rooms need to remain operational during the construction. And going on to SFO. So at SFO, again, West Coast project, a lot of changes to the building code. They've had challenges to upgrade their existing facilities to meet the new building code requirements. They also need expanded facilities for additional passenger capacity. And one of the things that we've been wrestling with is, how to retrofit these existing structures. So on the new Terminal 1 project, which is shown here, this actually had existing shear walls below the departures level. And the initial ask on this project was to try to keep the existing structure from departures down to minimize demo and hopefully save money. However, When our team won the project, one of the first studies was to see, does that actually make sense? Or is it better to demolish the whole thing and rebuild it? This is a design build project. So the contractor was on board, we helped them with some cost studies and schedule implications. And very quickly at the beginning of the project, we realized that saving the existing terminal just didn't make sense. With the lack of flexibility in the existing lateral system, that would be hard to retrofit, as well as it would not provide any flexibility to the new programming because a lot of the existing infrastructure is just not set up in a way that works with how airports are used today. Phasing was also really integral to this project, where there needed to be a partial demo of the existing both terminal and concourse. So there's actually two design build teams on this project. One was working on the concourse and one was working on boarding area B, and they had to work together for phasing and build schedule to make sure that the entire facility worked as a whole for both project teams as all of it was being upgraded at the same time. And then moving on to San Diego. So San Diego, again, outdated facility from the 70s and 80s that needed to be replaced with a new terminal. At San Diego, they wanted more gates. They wanted more airport dining, retail, and concessions, faster screening, which is an issue at a lot of these older facilities. And they also wanted kind of new trending things like updated technology, and another one was outdoor patios, bigger clubs, all the things that you're seeing in the new airport programs. Sustainability and resilience was really important to San Diego airport. So MKA conducted a whole building life cycle assessment as part of the airport's goal to achieve LEED Silver. And there's also concerns about future resilience. So MK actually considered tsunami risk for the new maps in ASC 7. Luckily, that didn't have too much of an impact on this project site, but it is impacting more and more structures, as well as the new hurricane requirements over on the East Coast. And we also considered sea level rise as well for a year 2100. So that's pretty new. This project has a big basement. That's another common thing on a lot of these airport projects. There's either baggage or utility tunnels underground that the passengers never see, but some of these tunnel systems are very, very extensive. So for sea level rise, obviously that impacts loads on walls, hydrostatic pressure, potential uplift. So all that was considered. And I think I just saw an article for New Terminal 1 at JFK, and they're wrestling with the same thing with the sea level rise over on the East Coast. There's also solar panels that will be installed on this project, which is another similar trend that we're seeing in an effort to use more sustainable energy. And the facade on this project, you can see the front facade is all glass. It's a luminous wave wall that was part of the public art initiative. And it actually allows the building to use high performance glazing to maximize the daylight harvesting capabilities and minimize the operational carbon footprint. Another unique aspect to San Diego Airport is they have a whole section of their airport where there are lease turns that come to nest once a year. So every year, a portion of the construction site was constrained to let the birds nest and have their young. So that was very important to the airport to maintain that habitat for the local wildlife. I think that's all I had. So happy to discuss more questions as they come up.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much, Juliet. This fantastic presentation. And I really like the jellyfish sculpture on the outside of that terminal also.
It's very popular. A couple of kids have already tried to climb it though.
Nice. Okay, and we'll close it out with Jason, who will actually give us a great story on the Syracuse Hancock International.
All right. Well,
So
good
off to you,
afternoon,
Jason.
All right. Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different kind of approach with my presentation, because we're kicking off a massive capital program because of a lot of changes that are happening here in Syracuse. And so the challenge that we face is, how do we develop and deliver new infrastructure, replacing old infrastructure, and increasing capacity, just given a lot of the financial constraints that we're all dealing with right now. So kind of set it up and tell a little bit of a story. If you'll go to the next slide. Coming out of the pandemic, we have been seeing a huge shift in the way airlines serve our market, and you're seeing this across lots of communities in the United States. So we are a Central New York Regional Airport, and within our catchment area, we have about 5 non-hub airports. And the airlines have significantly reduced or exited these markets. So Binghamton, Ithaca, Elmira, have all lost a significant amount of service, and the airlines are consolidating that capacity into Syracuse. So starting coming out of the COVID in 2022, we were double-digit growth every year. And then in 2023, Southwest Airlines announced first ever service into Syracuse. Lasted a little bit more than a year, and then we were one of the markets that were affected when they did their big pull down. So they exited our market in August of 2024. Why that's important is even with them exiting our market and representing 12% of our traffic, in 2025, we were still up 5% and broke 3 million passengers for the first time ever. So a growth trajectory that has been really incredible because of this consolidation in and around Central New York. And you can see on the graphic, on the map of New York, that's the growth from 19 to 25, and then at the bottom is how much of those communities we now serve in terms of their traveling public. All of that has put a lot of strain on our airport. But then in 2022, a major announcement was made as part of the Science and Chips Act that Micron Technologies would be building a new semiconductor facility in Central New York. And if you go to the next slide, it's transformational. It is the largest private investment in New York in US history. It's a $100 billion semiconductor facility 9 miles north of the airport. Looking at 9,000 direct jobs for Micron, 50,000 plus when you think of suppliers, just all the other support functions that now have to happen. So if you go to the next slide, it'll give you some idea of the size and scope of this project. It's going to be 600,000 square clean rooms, about 40 football fields. And that is just the buildings. That's not parking. That's not suppliers. That's not all the support facilities that go along with it. We're going to see a significant increase in population in the area. The salaries are going up. And then you can just think of all the support functions that have to now come into play in Syracuse and what that means for the airport. So we've had the shift in regional need and access to our airport from small communities. You add in this growth from Micron that's coming, and how do you develop that fast as a small hub airport? So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the timeline that we're working with for Micron. So they will start construction, ground clearing I think it's this month. If not, it'll be the beginning of December. The first contract was signed. It was a $1 billion contract just for site prep. So that gives you an idea of the scope of this project. And it is being fast tracked. These chips are the memory chips that are going to be really powering a lot of AI. So to receive the $6.1 billion from the federal government, Micron has to have 2 of the 4 fabs open by 2030. So you think about that kind of timeline, and we're 5 years away, and all of us who talk about infrastructure development and facility development, 5 years is not a lot of time. So the Micron facility, give you a little idea of scope, they're going to be using 25,000 gallons of water a day to cool. So you're talking water improvements, wastewater improvements, right? Roadway improvements for all the traffic that's going on. So there's a lot of work that's happening in and around this area. But then obviously for the airport, which is what we're talking about today, what does that really mean? So the next slide is the full schedule for Micron, which takes you out to about 2041, which was a key date for us because we realized early on that we need to fundamentally look at the airport in a different way. And how are we going to develop the airport to make sure that we can handle not only the regionalization of air service and capacity in central New York, but also be ready for Micron technologies. So we kicked off a new master plan. So if you go to the next slide, well, we go to the next one as well. There you go. So we started this effort when we saw the consolidation of the communities coming to our airport. And then when Micron made their major announcement in 2022, we realized pretty quickly that we had to go back and look at our forecast. So this gives you an idea. You can see going out to that 2040 date, which aligns with Micron's fab schedules. Just the sheer increase that we had to figure out from our pre-Micron announcement to what we expect to have happen with Micron. And I mean that this forecast continues to change just as the size and scope of this project grow. So what does that mean in terms of getting ready for the airport? So the next slide is the one that kind of creates our big challenge. So we will hit our 2030 master plan level this year in terms of what we need for infrastructure. So Syracuse Airport was designed. Give you some context. Syracuse Airport, for the most part, used to handle regional jets in say 2019. A couple mainline aircrafts here and there, but today, I'll give you an example. Delta Airlines used to serve Atlanta with regional jets from Syracuse. Today, we have 3 flights a day on an A321 aircraft. So that's from 70 seats to about 180, 200 seats per aircraft. We have that 3 times a day. So think about hold rooms, restrooms, restaurants, checkpoint, parking, all of those different aspects of the airport that we fundamentally have to change so we can accommodate. And that's just one carrier. We have 9 carriers here at the airport. So we now have to figure out how do we accommodate what we expected to have happen in 2030 this year. So you can go ahead, advance, and I'll show you where we are with our capital plan. So Syracuse Airport, we are a relatively new airport authority. We formed and took over in 2014 from the city of Syracuse. So we're like I refer to us, we're a teenager with a new credit card. We don't really have a lot of bonding capacity. So right now, you can see our capital program is about a $1.2 billion capital program, and the airport has the ability to bond about $60 million. So a little bit of a gap that we have to come up with of how do you deliver these type of a project. So you can see a big nut on this one is the terminal project. We've done a little bit of work to add some additional jet bridges and a little bit of gate capacity, and we think we can squeeze by for probably about the next 5 years. But we're already starting to talk about what that new terminal is going to look like. Parking is our other biggest challenge. It's about a $320 million all-in project. That's roadways, new parking structures, because the parking deck is about 40 years old, and we're out of parking capacity at certain times of the year in Syracuse. And Syracuse, we get a ton of snow, so covered parking is always at a premium, and our deck is full several times. Most of the time during the winter, we're full. You see at the bottom down there, I'll just touch on this real quick, the cargo and general aviation advanced air mobility. One of the other things that's happening here in Syracuse is that we are the only airport in North America that has fully integrated drones operating on our airfield. So we have, so here's a good master plan picture of it. We have the MQ-9s training here at this airport, and we have the Center of Excellence for Advanced Air Mobility. So we have drones operating off the airport every day in and around commercial traffic. So I'm not going to go through the whole master plan, just given the time that we have, but I'll highlight just a couple of the projects that we have. So if you go to the next slide, this is the terminal concept that we have that we'll be starting design on probably the next 3 to 5 years. Because what the work that we've done so far, we know might get us about 10 years, but at that point, we know we're going to have to build a new terminal. We are kicking off a checkpoint expansion project. Our bag system needs to be replaced, so that is something that's an enabling project that we're working on right now. But this concept will allow us to meet that future need, and as you see, it's all mainline aircraft, about 29 gates, I believe, is what we have. And then off on the bottom left, you'll see that's where we are starting to plan some of that advanced air mobility. You go to the next project. This is the one that we are working on right now. We've got it to about 15% design on the roadways and the parking garage. The Conrack will start in January. That's out right now. That is first, we have to do that because the bottom of the existing parking deck is where all the rental cars are. So we have to move them out of our deck before we can start taking down the deck. But as you can see, our roadways need to be improved. We don't have enough curb line capacity. We only have one road going in, so everybody is mixed on the curb. So this is a way that we can kind of fix some of that capacity. And you see some of the renderings that we have. And then the last project, which has been fast-tracked, is our new cargo facility. With Micron coming online in 2027, we are expecting and working with the carrier. They're going to start flying wide-body freighters 3 times a week into Syracuse to support the Micron facility, as well as the rest of the semiconductor suppliers and some of the other things that are going on in the region. So going from kind of that sleepy small hub airport to an airport that now has to support the largest private investment in U.S. history in terms of semiconductor manufacturing, regionalization of capacity, and as we talk about the infrastructure, putting the infrastructure in place to be able to support all this and be the good community partner that an airport should be. And so with that, that's kind of just a high level of what we're dealing with and the challenges for Syracuse. And I think at this point, we hand it over for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. We did have a couple kind of prepared questions, I think, for the panel. And I want to make sure that we leave enough time for open discussion from the audience, depending on what level of questions we get. So maybe I'll just ask one question for each of our panelists, and then we can kind of open it up for questions from the group. But there's a lot of emphasis in the public now, especially over the last year or two, on aviation safety. So I just wanted to ask maybe each of you to talk a little bit about within your capital projects and programs, what are the specific elements that you are thinking about to enhance safety? And just in a general sense, when you think about, all of these fantastic improvements, uh, how does safety sort of come to the forefront, and how is that incorporated into the capital program? So maybe start with you, Melissa, and get your thoughts, and we'll kind of go around and get thoughts from Juliet and Jason as well.
Sure, absolutely. Safety and security are the number one priority when in the element of design. So we looked at not just flight safety. We talked a little bit about the virtual ramp control, making sure that ramp, our vehicle operators, our aircraft operating within the new terminal footprint have have people watching them. So this state-of-the-art video monitoring capabilities that can help literally be eyes on the aircraft have been crucial to the safe operations, especially during snow removal, to keep aircraft and our passengers safe. Small things. We have, accessibility was one of our expectations for our passengers, but we were very intentional on not having a lot of elevation changes, having terrazzo floors that don't slip. So the safety from all levels of design were incorporated. So I think it's something that it's just non-negotiable.
Excellent. Juliet, just from the projects that you mentioned, was there one that stood out to you that maybe had a greater focus on safety?
Yeah, I guess so. So because I'm more of a structural engineer, I've come from it more of a building code, like safety, which is very important, right? That's why we're always updating the building codes, trying to make them safer and safer to include newest research, testing, or events like every earthquake teaches us more about our current design and our detailing practices. So part of all these terminal modernizations, it's implied that you will also get an increased building safety as well, because you're now designing to the current codes. There's a lot of states that have ordinances as well. So if you're dealing with an existing building, for example, if you're doing an addition or an alteration, there's triggers that I mentioned at CTAC. We're putting air handlers on existing concrete roofs. That's additional load. That then starts to trigger element retrofit, if not full building retrofit. I also talked about SFO, how we were trying to decide between keeping existing shear walls from, I think it was the 1970s. The detailing and the reinforcement in those shear walls is nowhere near what's required today. So it just made more sense for that project to tear it down. At CTAC, for our S Concourse project, we're dealing with an existing building. It has moment frames from pre-Northridge earthquake, which means that the detailing is not good. They're very brittle. They've also mixing and matching lateral systems between moment frames, brace frames, trusses. There's all of the current seismic demands have gone way up compared to what the buildings were originally designed for in the 70s and 80s. So none of the existing elements can handle today's demands. And there's also seismic joints in this building. This is very common, where back in the day they used to do 2-inch seismic joints, which are not far enough apart. So during an earthquake, you'll actually get buildings that start to hit each other and pound and get damaged. So in order to fix or upgrade that building to current standards, we actually have to tie it all together. And in this case, it makes more sense to just provide an all new lateral system that'll buttress the building, bring it up to current code, because the existing is just unreliable at this point because there's been so many changes. Other issues that we see on projects that are non-structural that come up a lot are changes to like architectural codes or MEP codes. So for example, egress is an issue. A lot of the existing buildings just don't have the egress that are required today. So we have to put in a lot more stairs to make sure that everyone can exit safely, whether it's a seismic event, a fire, windstorm, whatever the disaster may be. Other things too, like smoke control. So fire protection also has more and more requirements that we're dealing with for these terminal modernizations.
Great. Okay, thanks, Juliet. So another question, and I might pose this, Jason, to you first. But these are really big projects that both, you, Melissa, and Juliet have talked about. You did kind of allude to it in your presentation. I noticed there's, P3 listed for funding of a lot of the elements of your project. But sort of moving forward, what are your perspectives on, how do you think about getting the funding for the, all of those airport improvements and new terminals and, just retrofitting of existing assets? How do you propose sort of building and delivering them, with different funding models? And then I would just ask a question for you, and then Melissa, really is, when you're adding a significant number of new assets, are you thinking what are you thinking about from an operational perspective about how do you maintain them from an O&M perspective once they're in operations, and getting additional funding for now, an airport facility that might be significantly larger than it was before, and you've got a lot more assets that you need to maintain on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with the one on the first on investment. So that's the big challenge that we have in a small hub airport. The balance that we have to take is that we have to make sure that we're managing the costs that the airlines incur at an airport and being able to develop the airport. If our airport becomes too expensive for the airlines, you lose that service, right? And then that's what you're trying to avoid as you look at different ways to deliver projects. So a lot of this we will be looking for federal and state support, given the fact that this is a national priority with semiconductor chips, but also state. It's a huge investment on their part. But some of the P3s, like I'll use the parking deck as our big challenge, right? If we were to P3 the parking deck, we give up that revenue. Well, the parking at Syracuse Airport, that makes up 35% of my operating revenue. So if I gave that up, how do I run the rest of the airport? So we have to figure out different strategies, and then maybe there's the scenario that we just can't afford it and we don't do a parking deck, and everything in Syracuse is surface parking, which the community would hate, that especially the business community in February. But that's the reality. If the funding is not there to support the development, we have to make some tough decisions, and that's what's really difficult for us. Go in the terminal. We could build a beautiful new terminal. You could P3, potentially P3. It's hard to do that sometimes for small airports. But if you create a scenario where now all of a sudden the airlines are paying my cost per enplanement right now for an airport of our size in the Northeast, you want to stay somewhere between $9 and $11. That's kind of our target for our cost per enplanement. You start adding in all of the niceties of a new terminal, and you could easily be over the $20, $30 mark to the airlines. And the airlines, just if they can't make their profit, they're a business. If they can't make their margins, they're not going to serve the market, or the airfares are just going to be astronomical. You can't, no one's going to want to fly, and that's just, again, now you've kind of shot yourself in the foot. So we have all these needs, and you saw the graph about 1.1, $1.2 billion. But the reality is that's the need, doesn't mean that we can deliver it, because if the funding is not there, and like I said, the airport has a bonding capacity of about 60 million right now. So we have to be very, very careful and strategic in what do we invest in and what do we not invest in. And the way I look at it is, right now, what shuts down the airport? And for us, it's our baggage system. So the number one issue that we have to solve today is our bag system, because it cannot handle the number of bags that are going through it today. To touch on your security question, we are not an inline system. Some of the ticket counters have screening machines, some do not. They're at sometimes during the year, checked luggage is being hand screened in Syracuse. So that gives you an idea of how old our terminal is and what TSA is doing here, right? We don't have the infrastructure to handle the volume of traffic that's coming through. So if my bag system fails, the airport shuts down. If parking fails, people can find other ways to get to the airport. So that's how we've had to really look at some of these decisions that we make. And this is the same conversation I have with all of our elected officials as well, is when you look at the needs of an airport like Syracuse or Kansas City or any other airport, and the PFC hasn't been increased. You really don't see a lot increase in AIP funding, and the restrictions on what you can use it for. Our hands are really tied to be able to really deliver new infrastructure. So that for us is kind of how we're having to make some of these decisions. Going on to your other question on asset management, yeah, you absolutely take into account designing the system so that it's a lot easier to maintain. Right now, number of air handling units that we have at this airport that are different models, that are different, parts, it makes maintenance of the terminal difficult. The roof replacements that you have to do, all the old systems in terms of escalators and elevators. So as you look at those new facilities, what can you do to streamline everything, have things that are the same that make them a lot easier to maintain? Same thing with surfaces. Are they easy to clean? Are they safe to be on? Those are a lot of the decisions that we look at as we're trying to figure out what's the best way to deliver the capacity for the airport.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. And I'll ask Melissa for you to address that question. And I'm specifically interested in, now that you have a new shiny new terminal, what kind of challenges have you had in just maintaining that and make sure things are in a state of good repair and you've got enough maintenance staff on hand and all of that? And what have you been doing to sort of plan for that 15 years from now, and maybe some of those assets will start to need rehabilitation or replacement?
Yeah, I'll give a warning to my dear friend Jason. Expenses did not go down
Yeah.
with the new terminal. If you're a facility in the build the 70s, you have kind of non you actually have pumps that you can turn, and you have things that a traditional mechanic can fix, where what we have now is very electronically based, very smart technology. As a city, well, I'm not an authority, but as a city government, it's hard to um, hire and retain and pay competitive wages for these specialty services. So we have six third-party contracts that are a significant, I mean, actually make up more than our operational budget used to, and just those six outside contracts, um, just to maintain our system. So you go to a larger facility, a state-of-the-art technology, and it is a, I don't want to say challenge, but it costs money to maintain it. And so I think our CFO is hoping to see this big savings, and there definitely are savings in efficiencies and different things. But here's kind of a funny story. We have transitioned to LED lighting for our airfield lighting, and because of the efficiency of the airfield lighting, now our airfield lighting generator doesn't have enough load. So we're having to determine how are we going to ensure that there's enough load on our generator for it to actually function. So do we add more stuff to it, or do we have to buy new generators? So we're more efficient, yet sometimes that creates new problems. Um, um, I tell everybody we are raising a new baby. So our first several weeks of the new terminal being open. If you can imagine if you haven't have ever had a newborn baby and what that's like, it is just keeping the diapers changed and trying to, get them fed and trying to get a minute of sleep. We had to learn all of the things, and we have a ton of lessons learned on making sure that the staff sees the facility, the boots on the ground, that you go from here it is. Here's day one. They don't even know where the break room is, let alone where the keys to the new paper towel dispensers are and how to operate it, because they were literally doing that same job in a different facility with different paper towel dispensers. And we had trash issues. How we had trash in the old facility was the process and the leadership and the ownership of trash handling changed with the new contract for the concessionaires. And so nobody had talked about. We had to hire and buy trash trucks and hire people to move trash. We had a beautiful, fun, sleek trash cans that the holes weren't big enough for the big chicken concession bags, and we are doing three times more concessions, and now so you have three times much more trash. Um, I can still smell and feel and hear all of the lessons learned from those first couple weeks. How to clean the floors. What the terrazzo was. We went very white, very elegant, very sleek. White. We went from dark navy terrazzo that floor that had everything to sparkling white terrazzo floor that gave us no grace. So we have learned a lot. I would say now we're in our terrible twos. Sometimes we celebrate. We're rolling out new things about every month or 2 months, so we're growing. But at the same times, we have tantrums, and we still are learning. But it's kind of fun to look back and see how much progress we've actually made on the operations, um, and we've adjusted and grown. But um, when we look forward to our teenage years, we're definitely going to have to start looking at replacements, and how do you make sure from an asset management that you're not replacing everything in 18 years. That how do you start um, bathrooms every 5 years, and so probably at year four the busiest bathrooms are going to start getting replaced, and people will be like, you just opened. But yes, we've had 4 million people use this restroom over the last 4 years, and it's time. So it's a complicated living facility. We continue to learn a lot of things, but if anybody needs war stories, we have them.
Nice. Okay. Thanks so much, Melissa. It's a really good reminder that, asset management and lifecycle management challenges do not change when you have a big brand new facility, but they kind of start over again. And yeah, that's whether you have an old facility or a new facility, those challenges are always there. So I will ask Josh if there are any questions coming in, or if we want to kind of continue with just some questions for the panel.
Sure, we do have a couple questions. So one is a question on the different airports. Which delivery method was used to build the airports in Kansas City and Syracuse?
Kansas City, we had a master developer, but it was design build.
Yeah, and what we've done so far for some of our terminal bump outs and whatnot, it's been design bid build. We did do one design build um, on some of the concessions build out, but looking forward, that's what we're going through right now. Given the timing and how fast some of this stuff has to happen, we're looking at, is it CM at risk? Is it design bid? We're still evaluating how we're going to deliver the different elements that we know are going to come in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, if I can jump in here too. So we've been seeing a lot of design build at the airports or CMAR, both of which, get the contractor on board early, which is really key to success on these projects because phasing and operations is so important to the design.
Great. We have another question, which is, how have these projects improved your airport infrastructure overall, such that if you had to put a grade to it, what is that? And has operation maintenance been accounted for during the life of the improvement?
So I'll jump in first. On the new infrastructure, I mean, I would give our infrastructure right now C or D where we are. Just because of what we're trying to cram through this airport right now. So that with the improvements that we've done in certain elements, I would say the grade has gone up. Gate hold areas, concessions, HVAC, we did a full replacement of that. But some of the other systems, I mean, we're still pretty low. Restrooms, vertical circulation, some of the queue management areas that we have. Baggage claim being the issue, and our curb is probably a good C, D in terms of infrastructure. When the Conrack comes up, I think that's going to help with some of the roadway improvements and moving traffic around. But yeah, we're sitting pretty much at a C, D right now on most of the elements of the airport.
But that's the difference between Jason looking forward
Yeah.
to the project and I mean the terminal at Kansas City International Airport was a game changer for our entire community. It's given the airlines opportunities to have connections and upsize and add service and locations. That wasn't a commitment that the airlines had um, provided in the process, but has been a result of that. But it's made Kansas City a place on the map. Kansas City is going to be hosting 6 matches during World Cup and on a global stage. And we didn't make sure that the World Cup came to Kansas City, but it would never have been an option had the new terminal not been well on the way in the design and implementation. Um, our old facility did not gather us any credibility moving forward as a community where development was happening. So for us, it was um, transformational. And I would say if we weren't enough, I would give us previously a D minus in facility to an A.
Excellent. Josh, are that it for questions or?
That is it for questions. If folks have other questions, please put those in the Q&A box.
Excellent. Well, I have another question then. So I think the general public kind of forgets that airports are really small cities. So, it's not just airfield pavement and it's not just terminals, but there are roadways, water, wastewater, power, all of the basically components that you can think of related to infrastructure are usually contained within an airport's footprint. So I'm curious from the panel to get, especially since you've done some of these large transformational projects, how do you actually successfully do that when you're dealing with all of these different infrastructure elements at the same time? Improving roadways and having to relocate, water and sewer. You alluded to a lot of this, Melissa, with the Kansas City example of just figuring out and engineering and navigating the roadway system during construction, right? So I'm curious anyone to get anyone's thoughts, if anyone has any tips or sort of stories of how they navigated sort of that complex interconnected infrastructure element during their project. So maybe start with you, Melissa, and
Yeah, sure. I think we had a unique opportunity because we had the three terminals and we had infrastructure sort of already in place, although aged. We were able to build on a virtually clean site. We're able to bring redundant utilities without interrupting our current facilities. It was a standalone site. So many of my peers are having to build and replace and build and replace and build and replace in that same footprint. And so we did have, I would say, luck there. But the key to any infrastructure project is going to be coordination and communication and getting the right stakeholders at the table. We weren't perfect, and sometimes we laugh because we maybe had too many people at the table. In the middle of COVID, when everybody went virtual for all the things, you would have 100 people on the call and three people talking. So maybe that, but it's that challenge of finding the right people at the right table, who are the decision makers, and making sure that people have opportunity to voice where there could be pitfalls and concerns. But it is definitely, you know, operating a small army and making sure that everybody's executing the mission.
excellent. And I'll ask the same question to you, Jason, especially since you brought up just for semiconductor facilities, the needs for all of that additional water. Obviously for the airport, any big expansion, you're going to need more water, more power, that type of infrastructure. So, I mean, how are you planning for all of that? Given that some of those improvements are a little bit longer off, but are those things that you're thinking about, as part of the master?
Yeah, so when we started looking at the terminal and some of the improvements that we needed, and we actually started looking at adding jet bridges to the airport, what we learned really quickly is that we were already at the upper end of power to the airport, where if we added jet bridges there, we're afraid we're going to start having brownouts at the airport. So we didn't have enough power coming into the airport to handle what we needed to do. So we upgraded with National Grid, which is our local power provider, to get additional power before we started doing some of these improvements. Otherwise it would have been pointless to do this. As you look at going into the master plan and like the terminal expansion, the challenge that we face is we are still growing and we're going to have to replace a terminal, and there is nowhere else to build it. So, Melissa's point, we have right now about a 4 or 5 phase plan of how we would replace the terminal while keeping the airport up and operational. So that becomes really challenging to keep people moving through your airport, keep airplanes safe, but be able to deliver new infrastructure. Now you add in that micron layer, and while I love to think that the airport is probably the most important thing in the community and we should be investing in the airport, you are looking at 80,000 new kids in our school system in the next 10 years. So the number of schools that have to grow, they're doubling the size of the NICU at the hospital. The hospital just won a $450 million grant to expand their ER because of the number of people that are expected to be coming in to support the semiconductor facility. And what's going on we know the population growth, they're looking to bring online another nuclear power plant up in upstate New York, somewhere in and around. We don't know if it's going to be in one of the existing counties right around Syracuse, but somewhere in upstate New York. They're talking about a new nuclear power plant just to provide the amount of power. And so, yeah, you start talking about water, right? Luckily, upstate New York, we have a ton of water. That's part of why the semiconductor industry is moving up here. But getting yourself in that queue from a priority standpoint in the region to make sure we have enough water when the terminal comes online, right? Making sure we have enough power when we add a giant cargo facility, new parking deck, and terminal expansion with systems. So there's a lot of regional coordination that we have to be doing. And then it really is, there's like an order of operation of, okay, what has to happen first? Is it the airport or the ER? who wins in that discussion. So for us, it's trying to plan what we need along with everything else going on in the region.
Excellent. Juliet, anything you want to call out from any of your projects that have had sort of other similar complex issues?
Yeah. So there's a number of things, right, that happens on a project. So a lot of our projects actually have upgrades to central utility plants or just all new central utility plants because it's hard sometimes to upgrade what's already there or the existing infrastructure can't handle the new loads. So that's usually a portion of the project. On San Diego, there was a lot of roadway redesign and rework that was part of the project that had to be done in phases. The airport had to, close one roadway, open a new one. Passengers were constantly getting rerouted. And I think part of what they did really well is like signage and media information on the reroutes and, signage also to get people excited about the new terminal because it was rough for a while for people arriving to the airport. There's a lot of traffic backups. Every time you're going to the terminal, there's a new pathway that you have to use. So as a passenger who's not really familiar with what's going on, they're trying to alleviate or provide information to keep the passengers, at least informed, and get their buy off and get them excited as to what's coming. So I've seen that done well at some airports and not so well at other airports where passengers are flustered, they don't know where they're going, they're already stressed out because travel can, be very stressful. And it hurts the passenger experience, or it can make it better during construction. Because for a lot of these phases too, it's not a couple months, it's years, right? So, and then again too, sometimes you have to be smart about overall planning and coordination. You might need to demo a little bit of the existing infrastructure to be able to build more early. That's something else we also did in San Diego. Very small demolition of the existing Terminal 1. Built the first phase of Terminal 1, which just opened a few months ago. Turn over the gates overnight, which when I first joined the aviation industry, I was like, what? You're just here? And then the next day you're in a completely new facility? Yeah, that's what it takes. And then immediately after the new terminals open, demo. So right now in San Diego, they're already getting rid of the existing terminal so they can start building the next phase.
So maybe to close us out, I have one more question. A topic that we touched on a little bit, but I'm curious to get the panel's thoughts on just what you're thinking about in terms of technology and innovation. Like what comes next? Like what is the next challenge down the road for airports? And we all know that Uber and Lyft created a lot of challenges for airports. Where do all these vehicles go? Where do people get picked up? Autonomous vehicles are going to cause, obviously some other challenges looking forward. There are also, advanced air mobility, all these other things, that are out there. Melissa, I think you alluded to the fact that a lot of these new assets and building systems are a lot more complicated than the previous ones. So having the right staff trained up to be able to maintain and operate those is a challenge. I know I've been seeing a lot of that I work with also start to outsource some of that because the work is so specialized. But I think, long term, we've really got to find a way to train the workforce locally to allow people to be able to kind of grow and develop staff as well. But curious to get your thoughts on, what are the technologies that you see that sort of maybe you think are gonna be the next challenge for airports to deal with? And maybe start,
And
okay,
I'll
Alyssa,
go
yep.
first. And Jason has some, I mean, they're doing some very cool things with the integrated airspace. So he'll be much more intelligent about this. But I think really it's having the discernment of what's real and what's a fad. I receive probably 10 emails a day on somebody's latest, greatest, best idea and determining which of it has merit and which of it doesn't, because we don't have an unlimited pot of money. I think we all know that we're going to have electrified vehicles and electrified aircraft and autonomous operations. But if we jumped at every opportunity, we would be sitting there with 73 different types of vehicle chargers, right? So waiting, knowing when to lean into purposeful innovation and when to wait and see. We have the infrastructure, we have the power, we have the space, we have the thing. We just don't know what it is yet. And so anybody that's super great at picking the right, what's the old VCR versus um, DVD. Like
Beta.
if you beta, right? If you're have that wisdom
Yeah.
to pick, probably win the lottery. But Jason, you shake your head. We get unsolicited opportunities for what's the next best thing, and having that discernment is key.
Yeah, and for us, so I mentioned earlier, we're the only airport that has fully integrated drones operating on our airport. And it's been that way since 2016. And they operate completely independently, taking off, landing, taxiing around the airfield. And so we work very closely with the FAA. We've had them here. We do a lot of drone detection mitigation testing here with Department of Homeland Security. We've actually worked with the Transborder with V-Ports to establish the first advanced air mobility corridor between Syracuse Airport and Quebec. And so we're laying a lot of groundwork for advanced air mobility and the use of drones. We sit right now under a 1,900 square mile beyond visual line of sight commercial operations area, where so far to date, I think in the last 2 years, we've done 8,000 flights. We are operating quadcopter type drones off our airport today. And it's even happening within our community. Just launched the first commercial customer in the operations area. It's a drone in a box, or sorry, drone as a first responder solution for one of the counties that has a lot of rural area that they have to monitor. So bringing it back to the airport, we actually have now the ability over our airport to see what is a cooperative and what is a non-cooperative drone. So who's supposed to be there, who's not supposed to be there. So adopting some of that technology that we know that drones are going to be an issue in the future. They're already, you're seeing it overseas, you're seeing it in some of the news reports around certain critical infrastructure in the Northeast. So for us, that technology is, we know that advanced air mobility is coming. We've had beta land at our airport. We've talked with Joby. We believe that advanced air mobility is what's going to solve regional connectivity as these airlines, if you think about it, there's nothing aircraft wise being built less than 70 seats anymore. And there's a lot of markets in this country that cannot handle or support an aircraft that has 70 seats or more. So this is where advanced air mobility comes in, and airports really do need to look at this as a solution for regional connectivity. To Melissa's point, right? It's like the old phones, right? Everybody has their own charger. So who invests in the charger? What kind of charger do you put at your airport? We're not investing in chargers as the airport, right? Because we don't know who's coming, and that's really a private function of who's going to do that. There is rumor that they're going to come out with a universal charger for these things, but we'll wait to see what happens. It's the Apple Android battle all over again. So we are leaning in a lot in the drone space on the autonomous vehicles. We have had discussions with Waymo, and I think it is coming to airports. I think you would be naive to not think that a lot of automation is coming. But Melissa was right. There are so many ideas out there right now that you've got to wait to see who's the winner and the loser in it. And the technology's out there as an airport, but you got to wait until you really see what the capabilities are and how it plays into the whole picture of running your airport.
Excellent. Juliet, anything, do you want to add from your perspective? Kind of close us out?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of the new technology that's being used currently at the airports, like the facial recognition and LiDAR for security, accessibility technology, doesn't directly impact like structural engineering, what I do. We're just kind of along for the ride and help facilitate as needed. But like Jason was saying, so some of the advanced air mobility, including like the eVTOLs, which is the electrical vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, what if those are going to become more and more popular, if those are directly connected to airports, what does that mean? Is that tied into the terminal structures? Is it parking? Are they separate facilities? Like, how does that change the overall, terminal design or what we do from a day-to-day basis? So I'm curious to see, what happens there. Same thing with drones. Those become more integrated with the terminals? We now need facilities for taking off and landing on like terminal roofs. What does that mean for security? Things like that. So I'm interested to see where that goes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll close this out. There are a couple trends that I wanted to mention too, from a technology perspective that we're seeing in asset management. Certainly, one of them is building automation. And, as you have some of that new equipment for air handling units or for conveyance assets, they can almost monitor themselves and actually trigger work orders, when they need to have some kind of maintenance or repair happen. And I think things like that will help balance, I think, the staffing limitations that airports have. And you're also seeing a lot of obviously BIM for all these new developments and transferring that data into a maintenance management system, so that that process can start when assets go live. So with that, yeah, I'll just say it's been a pleasure to moderate this panel. A lot of fantastic ideas, and really appreciate all the thoughts and discussions. And sure, all the folks dialing in really enjoyed the discussion as well. And happy we were able to answer a couple questions. And yeah, I'll just pass it to you, Josh, if you have any kind of final things to close us out. And I think it's been a great discussion.
Sure. So if you go to our next slide, just a quick thanks to our sponsor today, Magnuson Kolmensic Associates, and for their support of this webinar. And then one more slide over. As well, want to encourage folks who haven't already done so to check out all details of our 2025 ASCE report card for America's infrastructure at infrastructurereportcard.org. We have our national report card covered there, as well as state-specific report cards that are being released on an ongoing basis. We also offer up insight and other perspective on advancing the nation's infrastructure through our news posts, as well as blogs and related information. So would appreciate you all checking that out. And with that, I think we can close it out, David.
Excellent. Thanks again, everyone. And yeah, hope everyone enjoyed it. And we will be making the information available.
Thanks so much.